Hello and welcome to my channel, IWinToLose Gaming. Genshin Impact has been out for quite some time now, and with it, we've seen some pretty interesting buffs over the years. In this video, I'll be going over my top 10 most buffed characters in Genshin Impact. So what does it mean to be buffed? For this top 10 most buffed character list, well, the character had to have been released and then sometime in the future got notably better. More specifically, Hoyoverse had to have added something or changed something about the game that actually made the character better. Skill issues such as the arc shot mastery with Ganyu, which took the player base around a year to fully idealize, are not included. So without further ado, let's kick things off with this top 10 list. But really quick, if you're watching me yap, it's likely that you also enjoy Hoyoverse games. Reintroducing today's sponsor, Genshin Impact 3rd. Genshin Impact 3rd Part 2 is back and better than ever, with massive updates, reworked combat system with aerial combat, and an entirely new story. If you're a boomer like me and played back in the golden days of Kiana May and Bronya's Innocent School Adventures, well, they're back and finally reunited in version 7.6. 7.6 is also bringing with it an epic new boss fight, Perception, the Overlord of Shadows, with really unique mechanics like protecting your reflection and dodging Tenmaku. And there's always a new waifu to collect. Songchue is the newest physical damage dealing character who can go Super Saiyan to obliterate her enemies. You'll get 50% off your first 10 pulls for her. But wait, that's not all. There's a ton more stuff like the new Astral Ops Serapium, an updated battle pass with Alicia in it, massive story updates such as Songchue's self-sacrifice, and Oto was revived to be an office assistant to collect swimsuit costumes for you? What? Smash that link down below and use promo code SHADOWSHOW to redeem your Songchue trial card and 2,888 Asterite. Huge thanks to Genshin Impact 3rd for sponsoring today's video. Starting with number 10, Baizhu. Baizhu felt like a healthy addition to the roster upon his release, being a great full party Dendro healer, shielder, and buffer. However, he didn't feel quite as sick of a character as he is in today's meta. Now, the reason why Baizhu isn't higher on this list is due to how decent of a character he already was, and a somewhat short time window where he languished at simply being decent. Now, you all know where I'm going with this one, but it's because of the release of New Villette in version 4.1, and then doubly so with the release of Furina in version 4.2. Baizhu is now an integral part of literally the best team in the entire game. And while he was solid prior to this, he certainly wasn't, well, literally part of the best team in the game. Now, not only is Baizhu still super healthy for the Dendro meta, and I know you're already sick of this joke already, but now Baiju's got one of the sickest teams in the game. And number 9 on this list takes a different approach, first suffering from a fall of grace and then landing back on his feet after, well, having to leap off his feet. That is Diluc. Originally heralded as the best DPS character on release, Diluc was quickly left behind in the dust by all the shiny new DPS characters. However, Diluc has had a major, unforeseen, massive buff with the release of Shenyun. Yep, literally years later, Diluc finally saw the buff that he deserved to bring him out of mediocrity and obscurity, and is now one of the best abusers of plunge type damage thanks to his fast and hard-hitting Claymore plunge attacks. Diluc is particularly noteworthy to me, having waited such an incredibly long time for his incredible redemption arc. Things finally heated up for Diluc. Number 8 belongs to the Traveler. Traveler has had an interesting journey to get where they are today. First being full of hot air, then playing with rocks, and then probably stuck a fork in an outlet to get such an embarrassing electro kit. After literally 3 entire continents, Traveler finally became relevant for free-to-play players after touching some grass. Seriously, the previous 3 entire forms of Traveler were not best in slot for any team, despite being basically 3 entire characters for all intents and purposes. And while Dendro MC was quickly power crept by new real Dendro 5 stars, Dendro Traveler is still a solid option for those radish list individuals, aka people without Nahida, It's great to see a character who I assumed would basically be useless for all of Genshin Impact due to the first 3 forms being so lackluster actually get some time to shine and become a solid character. But that all flopped like a wet noodle in Fontaine, but we don't talk about that form. Number 7 on this list is Keqing. Keqing also happens to be a release date character, and well, let's just say in the early days of Genshin Impact, we were running around with comical builds like physical damage Keqing. Many of us thought that the savior for Keqing would be the release of Inazuma and all things Electro. And while Kujo Sara was a nice buff for Keqing, Keqing still felt quite underwhelming, always playing second fiddle to the Electro Archon herself. And let's not even talk about trying to use Keqing with Constellation 6 Bennett. However, with the release of Dendro, everything changed for our career bureaucrat. Keqing became the premier on-field aggravate DPS character, at least for some time until Cyno came out. Yeah, I guess this video is not about Cyno, but I've already mentioned him twice somehow. Anyway, Cyno's existence doesn't take away from just how large of a promotion Keqing got with the release of Dendro. It's hard to understate just how big of a buff Keqing did get from Dendro's release, because she went from being extraordinarily unremarkable to an actually average DPS character. Dendro truly did help Keqing recharge. Up next is grab the 7, multiply by 69, carry the 420. Number 6, Kokomi. Now, not to toot my own horn, but I was one of the few content creators to actually see value in Kokomi for what she was at the time of her release. A solo mono hydro driver and a decent freeze option with unique AoE hydro application. However, this was just the beginning for our favorite cog in the military-industrial complex machine. Kokomi actually got buffed multiple times, but with each buff taking a different path. First with the release of Yelan, which made her mono hydro team even stronger. However, her first major breakthrough came with the release of Dendro. Being an incredible AoE hydro applicator and thus an incredible AoE bloomer, and specifically after Nilou's release, Kokomi became a bountiful core murdering machine, being by far the best AoE hydro bloomer who also happens to heal your entire party. Yes, her kit is actually perfect for Nilou teams. And Nilou teams are some of the most free-to-play friendly teams around. Not only that, but Kokomi's mono hydro team was improved even further with Furina's release as well. So yeah, Kokomi had buffs on 2 of her different playstyles, which I find quite interesting. While Kokomi can't crit, Kokomi's buffs landed a critical hit. Number 5 is another blast of the past, version 1.0's Jean. Jean was a reasonable character on release, but was quickly relegated to an awkward Viridescent Veneer user since Venti was so dominant. And then Kazuha was released, and well, needless to say, the rest is history. However, Jean has had a major resurgence with the release of none other than Furina. In version 4.1, Jean's usage rate was languishing at a very mediocre 2.4%. However, literally just one patch later with the release of everyone's favorite Salon Solitaire, Jean's usage skyrocketed to 18.7%. Yeah, this is a meteoric rise and is absolutely incredible for a standard banner character. Jean's full party AoE nuke of a heal finally actually sets her apart from the Anemo Archon and the true Anemo Archon. And I'll bet you're ready for 5-1, which is number 4. The legendary maid of Genshin Impact, Thoma. Thoma, he was basically literally useless on his release. His shield was flimsy, his pyro application paltry and nearly pointless, and really, he basically didn't improve any team that he was on. However, simply by letting players throw out green numbers all of a sudden, Thoma became not just a viable character, but the best at his craft, a burgeon activator. The poor ICD on his pyro application actually works just fine for this, and being such a compatible character with Xingqiu, all you have to do is mash left click against an enemy with Dendro on them in order to create exploding cores of doom. So no longer is Thoma aimlessly mopping floors, now he's mopping the floors of Dendro cores by causing them to explode. Let's just say he's finally able to sweep away the competition. Now before we dive into the top 3, let's sort through some honorable mentions. Obviously Furina's release doesn't just benefit Jean, but it also benefited other legacy full party healers like Noelle, Barbara, Sayu, so they deserve an honorable mention. Yae Miko also deserves an honorable mention as Aggravate really aggravated her DPS to new levels and made her elemental mastery scaling finally make sense. Chongyun, with the release of Shenhe, allowed him to turn any melee character into a pseudo-cryo DPS. And the last honorable mention is basically every single Pyro, Electro, Cryo, and Hydro DPS character prior to Kazu's release, as Kazu's release was an insane buff to anything that he can swirl. We've reached the top 3, and I personally think these are the characters that saw the biggest shakeups to how strong they are. Starting with number 3, Xiao. Now, I know some people are going to be upset at me for putting here on this list because anytime I talk about Xiao, someone's always upset at me because they think I hate him or something, which I don't. But yeah, putting him on this list also implies that Xiao wasn't perfect on his release and was buffable. Now, the reason why Xiao is here is due to the quantity of buffs that he went through. Upon release, Xiao was tied down to Circle Impact with severe energy issues and not really a team. Seriously, his teams were so awkward. Some were running him with double Geo, Zhongli plus Albedo, and that should tell you enough about how dark those times were. However, Xiao managed to rise above expectations with the release of Wanderer. That's right, Wanderer brought with him a granny who happened to buff Xiao tremendously, Farazan. Then, Furina was released, who, well, let's be real, is also an amazing buffer for most of the cast, but was a great buff to Xiao as well. But wait, that's not all. Hoyoverse decided to further buff their favorite child by releasing Shen Yun, to then massively buff plunge damage and be the perfect teammate for Furina. So yeah, Xiao's modern team looks nothing like his debut team, and he has had 3 direct buffs to completely replace his original team. Nowadays, Xiao actually deals some really good damage and has significantly better energy management thanks to having, well, I guess 3 animo characters, even though Farazan doesn't really generate animo particles, but that's besides the point. All in all, I'm proud of how tall he's grown after all these years and after 3 consecutive buffs. Now, number 2 is one of my personal favorite characters. It is arguably the biggest glow up in Genshin Impact history, Kuki Shinobu. Kuki was released in a tragic state. I even called it the Kuki syndrome. Her kit seemed really weird and all over the place. Poor electro application, mid healing, dual EM and HP scaling, none of it frankly made any sense. The player base was shoehorning her into applying superconduct for Eula and, for no joke, taser teams. Yeah, that should give you an idea of how sad the situation was for Kuki on her release. However, things were about to get kooky with the release of Dendro. Now, I don't think I need to explain, but Dendro's release brought about a little thing called Hyperbloom, which is one of the cheapest and freest to playest, friendliest ways to deal great DPS. And Kuki, well, not only was she the best 4-star character for activating Hyperbloom, she also doubled as a healer as well. And you know what's truly insane? Kuki has had many instances of having a higher usage rate than Raiden, the Electro Archon. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Kuki's Hyperbloom healing and Electro application made her the perfect candidate to support one of the best DPS characters in the game, Al-Haytham. So not only did Kuki become the best 4-star Hyperbloomer on Dendro's release, she also ended up being the best Electro applicator for one of the best DPS characters in the game, Al-Haytham. Unlike many support characters who do very little to no damage, well, not only is Kuki's personal damage from Hyperblooms alone usually enough to 9-star Abyss 12s, slap on top of that a top-tier spread DPS character like Al-Haytham, and well, things get kooky really fast. Personally, if it weren't for the next outlier of a situation, I would have put Kuki Shinobu as number 1. So yeah, that brings us to number 1, which is probably extremely obvious, but it's none other than Chi-Chi. Yeah, check out these cute little ghosties she has now. Alright, we all know it's Zhongli. Yeah, Zhongli was released in a middling state, providing a very clunky playstyle and practically nothing besides his shield. It was so bad that it steeped into 3D flesh territory, with real-life threats being thrown at Hoyoverse from the CN community. And to this day, Zhongli is the only character to have a major overhaul on his kit after his release. Zhongli gained resistance to interruption while casting his shield, a much thicker shield against everything besides geo damage, more damage across his entire kit, and most importantly, 20% all resistance shred all around him. Can you even imagine using him in today's meta without all these buffs? Yeah, frankly, it's practically inconceivable. In fact, Zhongli's buffs were so severe that Hoyoverse even overhauled a couple mechanics for Geo, such as Geo Resonance as well as Geo Shields to make them absorb things from all elements better except for Geo itself, due to Zhongli. So he led to literal mechanic changes to the game. Anyway, since his buffs, Zhongli has been one of the most reliable and most used characters of all time, and frankly, his buffs actually led him to power creep future shielder shielding capabilities, and the entire community was fine with this, myself included. Seriously, imagine selling a future character on the merits that their shield absorbs a specific element better. Anyway, Zhongli has become the comfiest of comfy characters and is so incredibly universal that there's no question to me that he was the most buffed character in Genshin Impact. And the fact that he was actually changed post-release and not buffed via an additional character being added really sets him apart. No one can deny just how rock solid Zhongli is today. So yeah, that was my top 10 most buffed characters in Genshin Impact. There were two major shakeups for buffing characters, being Furina's release and even more so Dendra's release. Let me know if I missed anything and what you agree with or disagree with. And don't forget to check out today's sponsor Honkai Impact 3rd down in the description below, as they make these types of videos possible. Huge thanks to Honkai Impact 3rd for sponsoring today's video. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is IWinToLose, signing out.